Hey everyone, this video is called How to Live a Happy Life, and I want to say this right away. I have absolutely no idea how to live a happy life. I probably know less about it than almost anyone else on this planet. And that's not fake humility, that's just the truth. But this video isn't named that because I'm going to teach you how to be happy. It's named that because I want to talk about something else entirely. I want to talk about how obsessively afraid modern people are of living the wrong life. An unhappy life, an unworthy life, an unsuccessful life, a life that somehow doesn't count. Now you might ask, where do I even get the idea that people are afraid of this? Am I just projecting? Am I imagining fears in some abstract, average person? That's a fair question. First of all, where do thoughts even come from? Humans are social and biological creatures. We don't think in a vacuum. We think through culture, through norms, through stories, through expectations that surround us from the moment we're born. We adapt to a system long before we're conscious of it. Second, and this is important, every author is, in some way, writing an autobiography. No matter what a person says, writes, or thinks, a large part of it is their own reflection. Their fears, their emotions, their ego speaking through ideas. I'm no exception, but I want to try, at least for a moment, to step outside of myself and aim for something more objective. To escape, even briefly, the biases that trap all of us. So, why do I think people are afraid of living the wrong life? I'd go even further. I think people are afraid of living at all. Because life isn't just success, wealth, attractiveness, and status. Life is also failure, doubt, uncertainty, loss, painful losses, injustice, humiliation, regret, and all of it, the good and the bad mixed together. Well, that is life. And the word that will quietly run through this entire video is maturity. I'll explain why I put so much weight on that word. Why I think maturity might be one of the last things that can save a person from becoming a fully automated, empty, meaningless version of themselves. So, why do I say people are afraid to live? Let me start with what I call the obsession with finding the method, the working system. Look at the world around you. Look at media, books, videos, YouTube, TikTok, podcasts. An enormous amount of content can be summed up like this: self-help. How to be successful, how to be confident, how to be rich, how to be attractive, how to be disciplined, how to be productive, how to be calm, how to be realistic, how to be optimistic, how to be anything. People are desperately searching for answers to internal questions everywhere, except inside themselves. Honestly, I wouldn't be surprised if soon we see books called How to Be John or How to Be Mike, and we already have books titled How to Be Yourself. Just think about that. A person already is themselves. A mix of character, temperament, hormones, upbringing, culture, beliefs, doubts, experiences. They already exist as a unique configuration of traits. And then they buy a book that tells them how to be themselves. Do you see how absurd this is? This isn't about mocking anyone. I've probably read books like that myself. I don't even remember. But it shows something deeper. A modern person no longer trusts themselves as a source of truth. Questioning yourself is healthy. Doubting your assumptions can be smart. But when a person places themselves at the very bottom, when they believe that even the question, "Who am I?" must be answered by someone else, that's where serious problems begin. And from this distrust comes an endless search for a working system. Wake up at 5 a.m., do 1,000 push-ups, learn 5 languages at once, listen to podcasts while running. Choose the right hobbies. Playing piano is productive. Staring at a wall for 30 minutes is useless, even if staring at the wall is how you think. Even if that's where ideas form. Even if that's where you remember the past or imagine the future. But culturally, it's labeled as wasted time. And instead of trusting themselves, people trust a checklist of what's considered correct or incorrect. This leads to another idea, one that hits even harder. I call it the world as a supermarket. The idea is simple. A person stops seeing themselves as a living, imperfect, complex human being and starts seeing themselves as a product. With strengths and weaknesses, yes, but not as individuality, as inventory. If we lived in a world of perfect people, there wouldn't be a single human among them. There would only be robots. No emotions, no mistakes, no risk, no humanity. Mistakes are not a flaw in life. They are life. As Kierkegaard said, life can only be understood looking backward, but it must be lived forward. When you gain experience, you can look back and say, I should have done this differently. But that knowledge only exists because you failed first. There was no other way. It's easy to judge your 16-year-old self from today, or your 25-year-old self, or even last year's version of you. But the idea that you could have done better ignores one key thing. You didn't have the knowledge yet. Now, back to the supermarket. In this mindset, even time must be profitable. If I didn't read a book today, I became worse. Worse as a product. Less competitive, because somewhere out there, an imaginary person read a book while I played a video game, and suddenly, neurosis appears. People develop a manic obsession with self-development, because the world becomes a marketplace where everything has a price, including love, including respect, including dignity. To be loved, I must be this. To be chosen, I must look like that. To matter, I must earn more. And here's the real question. Is this person developing themselves to understand the world better, to understand themselves, to give something meaningful back, ideas, creativity, care? Or are they just polishing an apple so it shines more under the supermarket lights? And if a person sees themselves as an apple, something that must look appealing to be chosen, do you think that person is happy? This mindset is exactly where anxiety, burnout, and mental illness grow. Because how can you be mentally healthy in a world where everything is a product and you are one of them? Love has a price. Family has a price. Honor has a price. Not money, value. And that fear of living the wrong life creates another dangerous belief. If I'm not moving forward, I'm falling behind. I used to believe that too. I used to quote Alice in Wonderland. Here, you have to run just to stay in place. And if you want to get somewhere else, you must run at least twice as fast. I applied that to life. If you're not growing, you're declining. And that mindset leads to burnout, emptiness, a constant sense of meaninglessness. I don't think life is a fight. I think life is effort. Effort can build a life, and effort can destroy one. The most important question isn't how hard you try. It's what you're trying for. Are these goals actually yours? And that's where real thinking begins. And this is where things get uncomfortable. Because once you start asking whether your goals are actually yours, you're forced to confront something most people avoid their entire lives. The influence of beliefs that were never truly examined. We live in a time where thinking your own thoughts sounds simple, almost childish. But in reality, it's one of the hardest things you can try to do. Especially now. Especially in an era where information never stops, where opinions are constant, where narratives survive simply because millions of people repeat them. There is one very common lie that almost everyone carries inside themselves, even if they deny it out loud. The lie is this: if I am not successful, then my life will be unhappy. If you ask someone directly, face to face, they'll say that's nonsense. Of course, success doesn't guarantee happiness. Of course, people can be happy without status or money. Everyone knows that, intellectually. But when a person is alone with themselves, that lie wakes up. Suddenly, it's not about truth anymore, it's about fear. Fear of being average, fear of being invisible, fear that if you're not exceptional, you're nothing. By that logic, in a world of 8 billion people, only a few thousand could ever be happy. And yet, people still believe it, quietly, privately, without admitting it. That belief survives because nobody talks about it. The successful don't talk about it because they're successful. The rest are ashamed to admit they're afraid. And so the lie continues. This is where endless self-improvement turns into self-destruction. More work, more effort, more discipline, more productivity. Because somewhere deep inside, there's a voice saying, if you stop, you lose. And that voice never rests. This brings me to something I want to talk about very carefully. The past. There's a scene in Fight Club, a movie I don't even particularly like overall, but some moments are sharp. Tyler asks the main character, "Who are you?" And the character answers with his job. No, that's not who you are. He answers with his name. No, not that either. His relationships, his status? No, who are you? Most people answer that question by pointing backward, by telling a story about their past, their failures, their trauma, their victories, their labels. Your identity becomes a narrative. But here's the thing. The same past can create completely different people. Take one life, the same event, the same losses, the same mistakes. One person looks at that past and says, I'm weak, I failed too many times, I'm unlucky. Another looks at the same past and says, I'm resilient, I didn't quit, I survived. Same history, different identity. And here's a terrifying question. If you forgot the moments that haunt you, not total amnesia, just the ones that replay at 3 a.m., who would you be tomorrow? Why does the past get to define you more than your present or your future? Nietzsche once said that at some point, a person starts living in their past instead of their becoming. And that's exactly what happens when fear replaces maturity. This brings me back to the word I mentioned at the beginning, maturity. We're taught to be many things: strong, smart, productive, successful, skeptical, logical, specialized. But almost nobody talks about maturity. Not strength, not intelligence, not confidence. Maturity. Maturity is knowing who you are and who you are not. Maturity is understanding what you want and what you don't. Maturity is knowing your limits without hating yourself for them. It's a kind of friendship with yourself. It's the ability to talk to yourself honestly, to place people in your life where they belong, like pieces on a chessboard, without feeling like you're standing on the wrong square. And yes, it's hard. It's uncomfortable. Sometimes it feels like madness. Sometimes I'm afraid I'm saying nonsense right now. I genuinely am. But here's the truth no one wants to hear. There are no perfect conditions to figure yourself out. You could lock yourself in a room for 80 years, read endlessly, analyze everything, and still understand only a fraction of life. There will never be a moment where you say, now I'm ready, now I understand everything, now I can live correctly. That moment does not exist. Maturity is the space between fear and action. It's when you stop chasing perfection, when you stop waiting for certainty, when you stop being paralyzed by the idea of living the wrong life. Marcus Aurelius once said, stop arguing about what it means to be a good person. Be one. Maybe it's the same with maturity. Maybe it's time to stop obsessing over what a happy life looks like. Stop comparing yourself to imaginary standards. Stop trying to optimize your existence like a product, and just live. Not perfectly, not efficiently, not impressively, but honestly. That's all I wanted to say. Take care.